Madam President, you have a quorum. I do need to note Laura Wilson-Phelan is out of town, and we need to have a affirmative vote to allow her to participate by phone.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Then we'd like to welcome our Chancellor, Antwan Wilson. We have a guest today.
Thank you.
First opportunity to meet some of us, so you see some of us right now. Do you know everybody? Do you like everybody?
I'd love to do an introduction.
Okay. Alex?
I'm Alex Dorson. I'm currently a student at Wilson High School. I'm graduating senior, and I'm one of the student representatives.
And then I'm Tribal. I work as a junior and a student representative.
One of the engagement meetings. Yes, I met your mom.
Hi, I'm Lynette Woodruff, and I'm Ward 4.
Good afternoon, Ashley Carter. I'm the at-large representative.
Jack Jacobson, Ward 2, and Vice President of the Board.
Marcus Bachelor, Ward 8 representative. Joe Lee, Ward 6.
With Butler, Wood 3.
And Williams, Ward 7.
Why don't we introduce ourselves and then sort of frame what we're going to do today, and then we'll give it to the Chancellor.
Okay.
So my name is Shanita Burney, and I'm the Chief of the Office of Family and Public Engagement. I have worked with many of you. Those who I haven't worked with, I know you through largely my community action team. And Cassandra Sanchez is representative, sorry, I'm doing your introduction. Is representative for 1 and 4. So really excited to be here today and have you get to know our new Chancellor even better. The way we're going to do today is share some sort of where we are with the strategic plan, the strategic planning process. For those of you who attended one of his 8 ward-based engagement meetings, you know that we were asking a set of questions to help inform the plan. So the place that we're at now is a lot of data was reviewed, and you'll hear him talk about that. And some emerging priorities and values and thinking has come out of that. And so we're in this sort of second phase of the strategic planning process and getting lots of feedback from parents, from teachers, from just a variety of folks. So today what we want to do is sort of present to you sort of where we are with the plan and get some feedback from you all and some thinking. So that'll be the first half. We've also allowed for some time at the sort of, I guess, the second half of the meeting for some Q&A. And we'll set that up and frame that as well. Because we know that it's really important to us to get feedback from you, but we know that you'll want some unscripted time with the Chancellor as well. All right, so if that works, we'll kick it off with the Chancellor.
So first and foremost, just want to say hello, and am glad to have a few moments with you here this evening. It's good to see several faces who I've seen during the various engagements out and about, and appreciate the fact that several of you have been helpful in terms of getting people to come to engagements, and definitely appreciate that. And a big part of coming into any space, I think, is trying to learn as much as possible from as many people as possible. And so it was really good to have support in terms of getting people out to engagements. I think it'd be appropriate to start with a little bit about who I am. And are these being projected? Okay, and we are like in virtual world, right?
Yeah.
So I want to say hello to the audience. I don't know where the camera is, but right there. Hello. Want to make sure that I take a moment to do that, and then also just appreciate the board for all of you. I particularly appreciate student representatives because it aligns with the first value that I have, and that is that for me it's students first. I mean, it is imperative for me that the system works for students and prepares them to be successful, to get an education they need. We as adults know what they're going to need. We know what world they're going to walk into, and we know that the majority of jobs, that 80% of them that are currently out there require some type of education after high school. That, quite simply, getting a high school diploma will not be enough for 80% of the jobs that are out there currently. The majority of jobs, 9 out of 10 that have been created since the recession, require education beyond high school. And then we also know that that at least half of the jobs that these young people will be pursuing, we don't even necessarily even know what they are. We also know they're going to do multiple things. Many young people have very numerous careers. And so all of that to say, we need to make sure that schools are working to prepare young people for that. I'm here and made it here, and despite being a student who went to a different school every year up through high school, moved every year that I was in school, lived in a different house across states, and had a number of other things that created obstacles, but yet still was able to go on to high school and college, thanks in large part to a determined mother and a number of educators in the school system. I know that we have to do this with kids, and if we don't, then it's going to come to some real, it's going to have some very real consequences for young people. And what I say to our team, and I say to people when I get an opportunity to meet with them, I say to you, it should not be this way, but it is true. And that is that the journey that young people have over 13 years, the 13 years of their life while they're in the public education system, has a disproportionate impact on what they can expect in terms of opportunity after they leave the public education system. It also has a strong impact on even how long they can expect to live. And so it's really important for me that we try to figure out and create a school system, and I wish it was like flipping on a light switch, but the idea is to create a school system over time that meets their needs. And so that's just all around student first and orientation around it, and I wanted to say that. The other piece that I wanted to say that I think is really important is, equity is extremely important to me. So if we think about excellence as the bar that we want all students to reach. So students should graduate from school, graduate from high school. We should expect that from every student. We should expect that graduating from high school should prepare them for the opportunities that they're going to pursue later. When you hear me talk about college, I'm talking about 2-year, 4-year institutions, certificated programs. I'm talking about education through the military or through an employer. It doesn't really matter to me. It is about students being able to pursue those opportunities. Well, if that's excellence, to say that young people are able to graduate from one of our high schools prepared to do those things and pursue those things, then equity is saying we need to make sure that students receive what they need in order to reach that bar. And so equity is not same. Equity is fair. And it's something that we will work very hard to get to, because we want to be able to have a system that says this is how we think about our work in order to ensure that the equality we want to see in the system, outcomes, the students being able to reach their full potential, pursue their dreams, all of those types of things, that is something that every student can get to. And that means that we have to think about how we support students at their level of need. And that also, at the macro level, at the school level, means then schools. We have to think about that. So that's part of it as well. Another piece that's extremely important for me is just teamwork. I do not believe that excellent schools are excellent because there's very strong collaboration that happens within the school. I visited some schools today, and I just thought that they were excellent examples of that. In my first letter from the Chancellor's desk, I highlighted a couple schools as well, and we started with distributed leadership. That's an example of teamwork. It's a leader working with teacher leaders, working with student leaders, working with parent leaders, community leaders, to think about what is it going to take to make sure the school is a great school. And I think that's extremely important. It's also working with district leaders. It's also working with city leaders and so on and so forth. And so you have to distribute leadership. You have to think about what is it going to take as a team collectively for us to reach big goals, do big things for kids. And then integrity is extremely important. Work hard to do what we say we're going to do. When we find that we are having a challenge meeting our commitments, we should explain ourselves and explain how we're going to try to meet our commitments. So that people understand that there's no hiding the ball here. We are focused on doing what we said we do, and sometimes there are challenges. This is how we're looking at mitigating or overcoming those challenges so that we can do what we said we do. So those things are important. You see the other concepts there. That means social emotional learning matters. That means you have to care about school culture. That means you got to care about community relationships and so on and so forth. So what we've been doing is, one, appreciating and I'm trying to recognize a lot of the amazing work that has happened here in the district. And I just think that it's important whenever you embark upon new work to take a moment to understand why you're doing that, but also to take a moment to appreciate the past work. And so in 2012, the district embarked upon the capital commitment, and they were some really bold goals to move the district forward. And the district's work has been focused on accomplishing these goals. When you think about at that time that enrollment had been declining and then slightly flat, and you think about since that time enrollment has grown significantly. When you think about at that time, the graduation rate was right around 52–53%, which means literally flipping a coin as to whether or not a student who entered in 9th grade would be likely to graduate high school. And you think about over the period of the time that this capital commitment has been here, that the district currently graduation rate based on last year 69%, we're on track to be at 75%, which means that the district has gone from literally a coin flip, 50-50 chance, to a situation where 3 out of 4 students can expect who enter 9th grade to graduate. And that's a significant amount of progress in 5 years' time. And so it's really important to call that out. Also, I think it's important to call out that the goal was to increase student satisfaction, and student satisfaction has grown significantly. The goal is to be at 90%. We're not quite there at 90%. However, there are several populations of students that are over 90%. And so we still have work to do with particularly African American males and females in that regard, at 81 and 77% respectively. However, we have a number of students that are over 93, 94, and there are schools that previously were in the 60s that are now leading the way because they're in the 90s. And so that's important to point out that this capital commitment goal was instrumental in that. And then when you think about being the fastest growing urban school district, looking at NAEP TUTA scores, when we started at this capital commitment, we were dead last in terms of NAEP TUTA scores. Now we're in the middle of the pack. That's because DCPS has had the fastest growth during that time on those assessments. And that's really important because when you look at the schools that in districts that we're being compared to, I know many of those districts are doing amazing work, and the district has during this time moved faster. Now, I mention all of that to say that there has been tremendous progress, and it's to be celebrated. And we have more work to do because we didn't make progress on all of our goals. So, for instance, our schools that that were the least successful then, overall, they tend to be still the same schools. There had been progress among some of them in terms of increasing student achievement, but not at the rate that we want to have, and certainly not at the rate across the board that we want to see for all of those schools. So I mentioned that to say we really need to unpack and make sure that we have more of those schools that are higher performing, And that's part of our work and why we're upgrading and thinking about the updating of the strategic plan. The strategic plan, as you see, ends in 2017, in June. So we want to be in a position to have launch a new strategic plan in the fall. So to help us do that, we've been involved in several engagements. And so most of my work in the transition plan, I came in and announced I'd be doing a lot of engagements with folks at a number of different levels. And I'm now over 90 schools that I have been at. Now I will always get into all the schools. And that's every one of our programs, elementary, middle, high. That's the students who are in our detention facilities or correctional facilities. I've had an opportunity to visit those students and their teachers, and it's always a priority for me. I normally have about 186 to 190 days to do so, but it has been the fastest way for me to get a good understanding of the breadth of the work that's happened here that has made a difference, but then also to understand where people are coming from as they express various opportunities for growth and improvement. And we've asked this consistent set of questions. You see here, how we've engaged. I had an opportunity to meet with students, high school students, around a table very similar to this, that represented high school students from every district high school. I did the same with middle school students. And then I did the same with elementary, 4th, and 5th grade students representing every ward. I can tell you that the engagement with the young people, I could have written a strategic plan from just those, because everything that I heard there were echoed in all the other engagements. And so it was really a powerful opportunity, and we've been collecting data along the way. Go on to the next slide. There have been some consistent themes that we've heard, and so we've been collecting. We have hundreds of quotes, literally hundreds of quotes, and they roll up to. These are the affinity groups here in terms of the major themes, and so I won't read all of them, but just to see that I think that these are a reflection of the types of major bodies of work that people are interested in seeing us make progress in. The last one I just want to mention, focus, is extremely important because, and I said this in several of the engagements, doing too many things at one time is the same as doing nothing. And one of the reasons why we can struggle, or systems can struggle, making the progress it wants to see, is when they do too many things at one time. And the reason why that happens is because there's a lot that needs to be done. And so legitimately we're choosing between competing important priorities, but by prioritization it just means we have to choose. And if we're going to get to a priority that is also important, we must successfully implement something else that we've sequenced as being ahead of that. And I just want to make sure that folks know, and I've been sharing that we will not try to do everything in the next 5 years. We will try to be clear of what we will focus on, and the things that we're saying that we will focus on, those are things we're looking to scale across the district. And then there's some other things that we may have pilots here or pilots there, or a few schools doing some things we might be studying to prepare the district for the next phase, which will be after this phase, where there may be some additions that we want to add. So let me just talk really quickly about the way we're thinking about a strategic plan. For me, I think it's really important to lay out a direction. Where are we going? What is some future state, aspirational state that we want to be true? What are we chasing? That's our vision. And then we think about our mission statement. What exactly are we about as an organization in terms of trying to get to that future state? And then there are other things that come across. What are our values? And so how is it that we want to behave? And having a common set of shared values, we think as an organization, is extremely important. And they should boil down to one word or 2 words that can be defined, so that we can then embed training programs around, leadership development programs around. When you hear me say leadership development programs, think leadership development, that's everyone. It's not positional. It is, as we're developing leaders in general, whether that be teachers, working with our related service providers, whether that be our principals, assistant principals, anyone in the organization, how do you develop, how do you embed values in the types of behaviors and understanding around the types of behaviors that we want to see reflected in how we work as a district? And then there is a set of strategic priorities, a small set of strategic priorities, anywhere between 3 to 5, that we say, what are the big buckets of work that will be ongoing for the next 5 years? And we want to make sure that we lay those out. And then within each of those buckets of work, there are, each year, there would be initiatives. What are the initiatives that we want to focus on in a given year? And keep in mind, the initiatives that we want to focus on in 2021 won't be immediately clear to us. But we will get to a place where we want to say, these are the initiatives for 17-18, and these are the major initiatives that we're planning for 18-19. And so we'll be thinking about that in 2-year periods of time. And then those initiatives then map to those larger priorities, and then we will then measure what are the big targets that we can use to measure our progress towards these 5 things, and that is similar to the capital commitment that you saw before. So what is it that we want to see change in terms of our data? And then underneath that, we'll have several sub-targets, like the key performance indicators that we can measure along the way, which are more discrete targets that feed up to those larger targets. So just wanted to share that really quickly in terms of the framework. And I don't sit in a room and craft this stuff. Everything is very collaborative, so our team took all of this data, feedback, we did surveys, we heard from several thousand people just in surveys alone. And they gave us a lot of feedback, and then the management team took that and begins to take that information and lead to drafts. And so we'll go to the next slide. One of the first things I want to point out is see how you see draft in the back? This isn't even the first draft. This is like the 3rd iteration of the draft, because we continue to do engagements like this. And each time that we just try to hone it, and obviously we will be launching and sharing in the fall where we finally land in terms of the statements. So the first is, you see the visions, just that vision statement currently, as it currently sits, again, coming from a lot of engagement, is every student is a critical thinker, leader, and innovator prepared to improve the world. So that is, again, vision statement. What is it that we're chasing? What is it that we would like to be true in some future state? Mission, what is it that we're going to busy ourselves doing to get to that future state? And so what you see here is to ensure excellent schools where every student experiences meaningful learning with talented educators in a loving environment that empowers all students to choose their life paths and pursue their highest aspirations. What I'd love for you to do, and we want to open it up and turn it over to you, is what do you like most about what you see here in the draft? You see again, big bold vision, mission statements. And then what are some things, I mean, how could we make each better? Like that. Okay.
I like the critical thinking part, because I think a lot of our students haven't been to know or taught how to do critical thinking, problem solving. And if we could add the social emotional part of it, I think that would be a great statement. Because from my own experience, if they don't have the social skills, no matter how well they come, they do that for
Got 2 really simple things. One, a letter from the parents of Fillmore Elementary inviting you to come. The arts program that I'm sure you're aware of. They asked me to drop off the hard copy of the letter they sent you a couple weeks ago, so I'll leave that with you. And then secondly, putting students first and student focus. We've got our student representatives here. We're searching for new student representatives for next year, and if your team could help us with that, we'd appreciate it.
Well, that sounds great. Check out both of those boxes. I appreciate you doing that. Those are really important. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. I mean, I feel like you're almost obligated to say good or trash.
I don't feel an obligation to say that.
Well, you say something.
I mean, keeping the student focus is just so important. I think they're just invaluable to have as part of the conversation. They're what we do this work for. And you literally put students first, and it speaks to the entire organization that you're running. And I appreciate it so very much.
Well, I think the one thing I would add is probably saying with talented and supported educators. I think a lot of some of the conversation we hear is that teachers also want to be nurtured and be able to grow in their profession as well. And I think that type of investment in educators trickles down to students. So really putting an investment in the educators as well, I think would be really important. I was just in Providence with a few members of your team talking about professional learning, and we heard a lot of those desires to have more time to do that for the sake of their students, and so I think that'd be really important as well.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I would add stability. So many of our families come from environments that are not stable, so an element of stability within that, looking at school leadership, teachers, and echoing the other two comments, socio-emotional piece of what Marcus was just saying. Otherwise, it's a great first start. I would love to listen to others in the community really dive in and talk about it, because I think the way that we often work as a board is we're collecting information just like you are, and then we're looking at it through our various lenses and presenting. So without having the time to do that, I don't want to speak for my constituents as to what they would say.
I think that I really like the way it's worded. I also feel that engagement is really important, because even now our children experience these things, but are they actually engaged in it? It's important, because engagement is something that we become not just peers, but also educators and parents and our community in general.
A few things. One, I'm worried that there's nothing in the vision that talks about helping our students reach high academic standards. And I think that's a loss, because all of this is in service of that. We need kids to be critical thinkers and innovators and leaders and really interesting people, because we know that's what's going to take them into the next century to be prepared for all the different possibilities that you're talking about. Second, I knew if I waited long enough, I think it's wraps off for everybody else. So I want to say just a couple of things about the collaboration and sort of the whole idea of social capital, and the idea that there's so much to be gained from strong communities of teachers in the schools, of families in the schools. And one thing that I kind of was sent here to say is one thing that people are really holding out a lot of hope for and are very excited about becoming is that there is a sense that in terms of the school community, by which I mean the families and the teachers and the principals, that there's been a sense of kind of a loss of a sort of democracy within the system, and less ability to sort of help shape the priorities in the school, to help shape the budgets, and to be part of a conversation that would determine what can work in the school, what should work in the school. So I'm really hopeful that that can be brought into it as well. So I bounced off of engagement, I bounced off of supporting our teachers, and giving our schools what they need.
So one of the things I was thinking about when I read the mission statement in particular was the word personalized, which is not in there, but it's a word that I do think should be in there, because I don't think that there's any one-size-fits-all solution for each student or each school. And for me, the idea of something being personalized is incredibly important to make sure it's successful throughout my school and also schools.
I was impressed with you when we started, and more so now. Thank you.
So I was also looking at the mission statement, and after talent, I was thinking of
thank you all for that feedback. So we won't put everything in the mission statement, so appreciate that. Otherwise, that's all we'll be saying. Just let you guys know, vision statement, it'll be short, and then mission statement, it'll be accurate. We're going for a good mission statement that we actually focus on doing, versus the perfectly worded mission statement that we can't do, or don't do, whatever the case may be. So we continue to tweak. I know that that version that you just saw looks different than the one that I use on an engagement on just Monday. We did a couple engagements at some schools, and so as we've received feedback along the way, we've taken some nuggets and just tweaked it. So, like again, the one you saw just a moment ago is slightly different. The same with the vision, slightly different, because every time we hear something that we think can make work and stay within that frame, we tweak. But we have the larger priorities. So the strategic priorities are to say, what are the big buckets of work that initiatives fall within? Because every year there are a set of initiatives, and some initiatives roll over. I mean, there'll be some initiatives that will stay 5 years because it's just going to take that long to do them well, and then there'll be others that'll be a year. And you, as a system, we want to be in that 10 to 12 initiative deal. And just when you hear 10 to 12, don't think every school. Every school will push them to work to identify 3 big things they're focused on each year. Just 3. Now we have 116 schools, so it's really to your point, Alex, that we have to work with schools to personalize. And there may be several things that we say these are the macro things that we're focused on in terms of initiatives, but then the schools have to work through within those things, which are the things that really come to the forefront for them that particular year. Now, there are some things that are universal, so you have to do work around improving and supporting people. That just, this is a people business. But then there'll be differences by school in terms of even what that means, because schools are different places in regards to that. But you see the big bucket priorities here, and again, you see the draft on the back and in the heading here. These again are slightly tweaked from my last engagement around these on Monday. On the first one, think about the bold one, what you see in bold as the it. Okay, and then what you see below it, after it is just a brief explanation around it, but the bold is the it. So promote equity, empower our people, educate the whole child, ensure excellent schools, and engage families. That's the end. Okay, and then you see the those are the 5 buckets there, and then you see behind it some descriptors. So I want to get into the same questions we just asked. Give you an opportunity here.
Well, I think the question that the thing we just asked me here, basically. So, and your priorities, and not in the mission statement or the business statement. That's okay, as long as they are your priorities.
Well, the idea, thank you for that. I mean, the idea is if you were to look at looking at the mission statement, and for instance, promoting equity. We talk about ensuring excellent schools where every student experiences. Well, then you got to do equity then. If it's every student, right? Because every is trying to individualize kids, and then you talk about empowering our people. Well, if we're going to have meaningful learning with talented educators in a loving environment, then we have to put teachers, principals, staff members, all of that in a position to make some decisions and to lead. Of course, there should be a consistent thread and framework. So I appreciate that. The idea is to say, how do you foreshadow the types of initiatives that you're going to do in your mission, and then how do you define them a little bit more with your big priorities, and then below that, as we come up with initiatives, how do we make sure people understand that's the why? We say, why are you doing this? Well, remember we said that we wanted to promote equity. This is why. Or we said we're going to engage families. This is why. Other thoughts?
how do you hold yourself and your team accountable over the long run for adhering to the mission, vision, and priorities?
Well, there's a whole set of things eventually. I mean, we lay out the strategic plan, but I mean, there are targets that we will set that go with it. And, we aren't there yet, but let me say that we aren't sharing them yet because we need to get the work right first. I think a lot of times we try to fit our priorities and our targets to our work,
Right.
and very intentionally trying to say, no, that's not what we want to do. We want to identify what are the greatest needs and all that, and then how would we set about focusing what we're going to do, and then what targets would we go towards. Now, I was like, for me, I tend to think more the aspirational and the more affirmative. So we're trying to build excellent schools. We want more of them. So the idea is, if we have schools that aren't where we need them to be, then we need to improve them. But I'll say it in terms of increase excellent schools or ensure excellent schools. I won't say improve low performing schools. I won't say it that way. Okay. Of course, we need to improve low performing schools by making them excellent. So how do we measure? Well, we want to define it. We want to define excellence. What are the things that we look like? I think there are several things. So, for instance, in the ensure excellent schools, as DCPS, we need to define when we say, what a school looks like that's excellent. I think there are several things that go into that. I think that they are certainly academic outcomes, particularly high growth metrics that matter. I think that there are culture and climate metrics that matter. I think that there's some retention metrics that matter in terms of staff retention. I think that there's some satisfaction data that matters in terms of what do students say about the school, what do parents say about the school, what do educators communicate about wanting to be in the school. So I think all of those things matter. So we have to define those types of things. And so, that's just an example of it. And then we report out. This is how we think we're doing. One of the things I did in my last district is at the end of the year, I reported out. This is how I think we're doing. And that was something that I sent to the city, public. And, I even in the last district, I color coded it and said, I think we're right on this. I don't think, I'm hearing a lot of positive accolades, but this isn't really where we said we wanted to be. This is why we think we're there. This is what we're going to do about it. We're yellow on this. We've gotten a lot of it done, but there are two things that I think are lagging. Or we're green or blue on this. Blue, we completed it. Green, we're right up track, and it's going well. So we will develop ways to communicate out here publicly and be out there. And people may disagree or agree, but we want to make sure that we are trying to build systems of transparency, building upon the work that happened before me. So this isn't where I'm coming in saying, oh, well, we're going to do all of these things in a different, better way. What we're trying to say is we're trying to build upon it's an evolution within the school district. So there's a lot of great work that's happened here that puts us in a position to build from there in terms of reporting out and accountability. Any other thoughts?
Quick question. So looking at these priorities this is your 5-year strategic, your next 5-year strategic plan. A lot of these are I like that it's affirmative statements. I like that it's broad, but at the same time, because it's so broad, what are some of the concrete measurements you're going to have, and what are the consequences you and your team will face if we aren't hitting those goals, the concrete ones? For instance, it's great that we're saying ensure excellent schools, okay? Yes, we want to improve schools, but a realistic measurement, are we going to improve 5 schools, for just an example, of our lowest 40 performing schools within the next school year? Are we going, what are some of those concrete down in the nitty gritty, and what's going to happen if we aren't hitting those goals?
Well, I think that we know long term, let me answer the last question first. We know long term what's going to happen if we don't hit our goals. If we don't hit our goals over a longer period of time, we're going to have students not graduating at large rates. That is going to play out by race. In socioeconomic status, we know that's going to impact students' health outcomes. We know it's going to impact students' life expectancy. So, and a lot of folks are going to look and point fingers and all of that. I mean, so we know what's going to happen. And so for me, because those are the types of things that have been happening across the country when we don't have that. In terms of the metrics that we're going to lay out, as I shared when we began, we will share that when we launch strategic plan. I'm not going to share that here today. That would be putting the cart before the horse. We want to lay out our priorities. We want to begin to identify our initiatives, and then when we launch the strategic plan, just as the last plan, we say this is how we're going to measure our progress. You know, we set targets to hit them. You know, we set targets to make it. But in order to make it, it's just going back to something I mentioned earlier in terms of the value around collaboration and all that. A lot of it is, for me, it's really trying to highlight success and making sure that we're positioning our schools to have success. I'll just give you an example. When we say that a school is low performing, well, there are a lot of schools a lot of reasons why a school couldn't be in that position. Are we willing to look at all of them? And some of that has nothing to do with the school system. And so that means, then what are the partnerships we're going to have across the city? How does that fit in with what we're doing around housing strategy and job creation? What is that doing? How does that impact how we think about health, access to health care, and food? Well, we as a district will have a position around what we think we need to be doing and where our role is. And so there are some metrics that'll be ours, but we're also hoping to engage in partnerships with other organizations so that some of this stuff is aligned. And that's our goal, to do that. And then we'll always report out. This is how we think we're doing, aligned with where we're at. And some of that will be subjective, and others that will be objective. And I think both matter.
Just in terms of the metrics, as you think about it, as you know, we just went through this whole ESSA process, and now have a ESSA task force that's going to work on different ways to try to improve on what has already been adopted. But one thing that a lot of us were concerned about, and I know you were too, just mentioned it, which is this academic growth indicator. And I hope that you can really find a way that we're able to show what the growth is in these schools and make it as public as any other number. Because we all saw the article in the paper the other day about people who don't want to send their kids to Cardozo because they don't like the test scores. I mean, these test scores just sort of redefine in people's minds everything that used to be, and there's no sense of what the growth is. And I just think being able to break through that and being able to do that sooner rather than later is going to be critical to one of your previous goals, which is improving enrollment.
Thank you for that. What I would say is I couldn't agree with you more on that. When people are making decisions about schools based on status scores, and that is the percentage of kids who met or exceeded standard alone, then that's just completely insufficient information. It's good information, it's just insufficient. Because what it doesn't tell me is how well did students, similar students, progress in a particular school over a given period of time. And I have seen data in school districts I've worked in where the school that everyone was trying to get into for certain populations of students was actually the worst school for that population to go into in terms of how much growth was being produced, in the school that was closest to their homes were amongst the best in terms of how much students progress in the same period of time. We want people to have a window to see. Now, we want it for a couple of reasons. We want to improve the school that everyone wants to send their child to with that particular population. But we also want to make sure parents are making the best decision with the best information possible, and to say that it's more than just test school. I mean, trust your eyes and ears and feel when you walk into a school. Does the environment, in terms of the way you see teachers interacting with each other, the leader interacting with the teacher, the staff and adults interacting with students, the way the school interacts with the parents and the community, does that look and feel and sound the way you would want it to look, feel, and sound? And then when you start to ask questions around what the goals are for your child, are they structured to help you meet those goals? And I will say, after visiting 90 plus schools, there are a lot of really good schools in the district. And I'm hoping hoping that we can, over the course of this of the next 5 years, partner with the city and various organizations that are really interested in supporting schools that I think are doing some tremendous work in several of our wards that many times folks aren't associating with doing great work. And I've been in these schools and wait a minute, there are some amazing schools here, and we need to make sure that more people know about how awesome these schools are and how much growth. I've been in some schools where if you look at their status, you'd say, it's not as good, but then I look at every growth measure and it's exponentially improving. And which means that if they continue to do that, 2-3 years, all of a sudden you're gonna see a big jump because they have taken kids who were significantly below grade level and they're gonna be on grade level. I do have one more slide. Oh, go ahead.
If I could echo just something you just said there, I think it's very important for individual schools to have an identity of what they're known for in the community. I think right now, when we think about DCPS, at least in our community, it's the human that's governed by central office. So the more that we can talk about how Elliott Hine is the IB school, Stuart Hobson is the museum magnet, Jefferson serves an at-risk population and is doing great things with them. And give each of those schools, whether it's a socio-emotional, a programmatic, or other identity, the more you're going to engage families, because families are looking for that type of information. And right now it's really, really hard to find. And to differentiate within DCPS, it's very easy for a family to differentiate across the public charter sector and find a school that they think fits their kid. Within DCPS, that's not really easy to do at this point.
No, I definitely appreciate that point. I think it is important to do that, and I think part of our work is to help parents not fall into that as well, because I think that when we have, for instance, multilingual dual immersion schools, we want to be clear and make sure people know that those exist. Or if we have schools with very strong international baccalaureate programs with primary years and middle years and a diploma program and then the CT IB certificate, we want to make sure people know that that exists. I also want to make sure parents are really clear around that it's just a good school. So for instance, I think about the highest performing school in the city, Benjamin Banneker, in terms of just looking at state assessment scores, 98% of the kids yield English language arts, and then a very high percentage in terms of math meeting or exceeding. That school has advanced placement, it has international baccalaureate, they emphasize science, a lot of science programming. Students spend a ridiculous amount of time writing, and it's hard to put them in one box. What they're really focused on is being an excellent school. When you think about Schools Out Walls, it's one of the highest performing schools in the region, and actually in the country, in terms of student college preparedness outcomes. Schools Out Walls has a really great arts program, a really strong liberal arts program. They do a lot of expeditionary learning, and so we want to make sure that we do both. That we are able to have parents say, yes, we have thematic schools that have a particular niche, if that's what you're really interested in, STEM, STEAM, arts, that type of deal. But then we also have schools that are really good schools, and these are the programs that they offer where we're really clear within the programs that are available, so that if you're a school, as Alex just mentioned, and you are really trying to implement a personalized learning approach as a school, that parents would know that that's what they're doing, and that may be different than an IB school. I took the time to explain that just to say that we won't have all thematic schools. We will have some that's exactly right, and we want to work with schools to get clear. What I like to ask schools is, what is the compelling reason why a family would choose your school?
And that's really what I'm trying to get to. I would say all the schools Ward 6 are great schools.
Yeah.
They're great at different things, and they serve different schools.
Yeah.
They're different students in different ways, but they're all great schools.
So it's the compelling,
but what's that compelling,
absolutely
defining characteristic of the school?
I agree.
And we don't know.
I agree. I do think that we have to make sure that all of our schools can answer that question, and then we help them market that.
That's the word that I've been looking for. It's marketing, and that's something that the charter in my ward has done better than the DCPS DCPS schools in my ward is they market themselves to the neighborhood, to the community, to the city, and draw in students. I have not seen, I think that's been a missed opportunity at DCPS, and I'm really glad that you're gonna be focusing on that, because I think there's just folks want DCPS to succeed. My constituents want DCPS to succeed, but they need to feel that they're being heard, and that that DCPS wants those children to come to those schools.
I definitely agree with that. I wanted to just share this one little nuance, and it's actually more an addendum than it is anything else, because I couldn't agree. I agree 100% with everything I heard. I just want to express the challenge that DCPS had. I mean, a big part of the idea of doing DCPS, we're 116 schools, okay? And then you have the largest charter isn't close to that, right? And so they can move a lot faster, be a lot more nimble in terms of that. A big piece that the previous leadership had to do was get the brand of DCPS to be one that people would be willing to consider. And so a lot of that work that has happened in the district has been on that, and I would say they were hugely successful there. Now, the next phase of the work is exactly that. And so one of the things that I've said to folks is, you know, when I travel around and I see with a lot of the charter schools, I'll see something about a specific school, right? And it's branded around that school. And then most of the time I see our branding is DCPS. And but a great example of how we could think differently about that, or maybe evolve our thinking, is around College Preparatory Academy. Because it's a DCPS school, but we've seen a lot of specific Ron Brown marketing. And I think we need to do that for all schools. We have to think about how does that look to help families do that, while making it clear that it's a DCPS school. And so I just wanted to add that addendum in agreement around the nuance of how that works.
There's sort of another nuance in this is, as you say, there's 116 schools that was your number. So I think it's really important to figure out how to let those schools, to some extent, be nimble, right? To be nimble, to think about what their strengths are, to have a little more autonomy. There was I've been sort of in and around DCPS for about 20 years, and there was a time where there was too little standardization and everybody was off doing crazy things, and then we went through a certain period, and now there's this, it gets back to what I said originally, I think this focus on standardization that is driving people, I think a lot of people, absolutely nuts. And it loses the opportunity that you have up there about really trying to build on the people and using the ideas of people. So I just hope that as part of doing this, that you're really thinking about what's the right way to give schools some autonomy to do this, while respecting that we want to be one system. People are in DCPS, we want to be part of that system. But we want to be wanted.
I'm going to go to Joe, and then I'll say something on that. I do have thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. What I would add, though, is, and I'm somewhat unique because almost all of Ward 6 feeds to Eastern. We would love to see an Eastern brand and clear vertical alignment. I talk all the time to Principal Brown and the football coach. What's the Eastern way of teaching and tackling drill? That should be taught at the middle schools. That should be taught down in the PE leagues that operate. So what's the Eastern brand? And what's the Blue brand? What's the Wilson brand? And how do we really build those out? I would argue parents don't care about DCPS or public charter. They care about the school, and they care about the pathway to graduation. So creating those pathways, and that'll address in some ways, I'm sure you saw the post article over the weekend about middle schools and the eroding enrollment. How do we build that bridge between every school in Ward 6 has a waiting list to Eastern? We have to build that brand, and that brand is the Eastern way.
Thank you. So a few thoughts on that. There is a piece that so on all of this piece here, Sheena has been available, so she could either co-sign or not on this, and I think she would agree that I work hard not to be a tyrant, so if it's not, I certainly don't throw any credit or anything.
I wouldn't disagree though, but I do agree.
I've not not given my opinion on the priorities specifically. On the priorities, on the vision, or the mission. This has been collaboratively constructed. My experience has been that if I can give people access to the same information that I have and put them in a position to make difficult decisions and really try to go through a process to hone and be specific and help provide, if I provide the North Star, they'll get there. They'll get there more times than not. And so the vision, I will let you know that, you know, I said to our team, I'm a bit conflicted because I really like it, but I'm conflicted around the SEL piece there. But I see the components, so but then in the mission, there's a lot that I like there. It's good. I mean, it's mostly right where I want it. And then then the priorities, we're hitting the right things. And so but the piece that I will make the decision on is the theory of action, and that's the piece that we're not showing. So it's, what is our philosophy in terms of how we go about doing this work? Now, I believe strongly that the schools are the agents of change. Meaning, the magic is in schools. And as long as people are primarily oriented on the district, and I mean just the average Joe Q citizen, then we are missing it. And the reason why is because, I mean, how much time did you spend in district office today? That's why. It is the same with parents and most community folks. The majority of your interaction with school districts is going to be at schools. And so that's me agreeing with both of you in terms of that comment. Now, then what is it that districts do? Well, we have to make sure that we ensure fairness. That's the equity. That we set a very high bar, what the standard is. That we have really strong systems of support. That we are really out there working to ensure that we get great people. That we are finding ways to develop those people. And that we work to try to retain the most talented, effective people. And then that we try to have really good forms of communication out and report out on our progress. And that's the high level work of districts. And so a theory of action is to say, how are we going to get from here to there? And we will talk about that piece that you just mentioned. And so one of the internal conversations we're having in our management team is just really trying to get the team to think about what is the right type of bounded or defined economies that we want to lay out. And that is to be crystal clear with these are the things that are tight, and then these are the things that you get to make decisions on. And my general orientation is that we don't want too many things tight, because then it can stifle creativity. But you can't start there. If I were here 5 years ago, and 9 years ago, I'd have been super tight. Super tight. I have mad respect for the leadership that came before me because they put us in a position to have this conversation. Okay? When a lot of things aren't working, you gotta fix it. And I know people can feel a lot of different ways about it, but you gotta fix it. Now, we have to think about, wow, if there are some schools that are positioned to think about this differently, and essentially the way to think about it is their bar, our bar is high, and they have found a way to raise it higher, then we have to allow them to teach us. And that's the way we want to do it. So there's some schools that can teach us some really good lessons around social emotional learning. I was at, let's see here, I want to make sure I get the school right today. I was at Key. I went to 3 schools, so I want to make sure I said the school that the last was at Key. In Key, spent a lot of time researching. This is not the only school that I could name others. But they spent a lot of time researching SEL. They've done some studying. They've had a thoughtful implementation of the work. I got an opportunity to observe it, and they can teach us a lot about that. The district, they can teach the district a lot about the work. Stanton, I visited Stanton Elementary School. They're doing some amazing work around empowerment of young men of color. I've had an opportunity to see the implementation. I see that's one of the schools I was mentioning earlier when I said that they have interim data that is showing a spike with African American male interim progress, that you gotta know to look at because it is really impressive. They can teach us a lot about how we do that better as a district. And so I agree with that we have to figure out what the right approach. The way I use, the analogy I use with the team is Starbucks. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I just say that up front, but I've been in a lot of Starbucks. A lot of people like to have meetings there. I generally order some type of hot chocolate or smoothie or get a water. But I'll, staying with the analogy, people know what to order. People who go there and that's what they drink, they know what to order. Starbucks has even convinced people they need to start their day there. They've convinced people. And many, they've even convinced they need to end their day there. And stop in between. People know just what to order. But they look different. In terms of the decor, the environment, so it's just, there's variance. So they're really clear as to what makes it Starbucks, what's tight and what's loose. And so we want to think about that. What is the secret sauce in terms of things that need to be true? How do we treat people? What types of expectations we set in terms of the types of academic programs we offer? How do we support kids when they need additional support? How is it that we communicate with families in a meaningful way? How do we create spaces for teachers to collaborate in a very rigorous and thoughtful way? Those things, tight. Loose. What are the different program options that you want to pursue when you find students need additional support? There could be 5, 6, 7, 8 different ones, but we care. Here's a menu. Which ones do you want to use? Which is right for your school? And then there are things where we say, schools may say, you know, we are really interested in being a STEM school and really getting smart around that. And what we should care about is that they implement it well. And that it fits into a larger regional approach, kind of like what you were just saying. So let's not start a STEM school in this neighborhood if there's no place for those kids to go in this region. So let's think about what it looks like in a regional approach. Or, yes, you can be a STEM school, but how does that fit within, just using the word sense context, how does that fit within the IB landscape, which it could, but to try to work with schools on that. So I just have one more slide that I wanted to show you. And I show a lot of data. And so I'm in the weeds on a lot of data, but this is one that I like to show people to speak to the opportunity that exists for us in the district. And so this slide is just looking at English language arts PARC assessments scores last year, and looking at math PARC assessment scores last year. And in each box to the left, you see non-economically disadvantaged students disaggregated by race and ethnicity. And you see economically disadvantaged students disaggregated the same way. Now let me just say this, I have been around and I've seen some amazing folks who every time without fail, people ask me what has surprised me. What has surprised me is how consistent people have been in their desire to see improvements for all students across the city. I have been in Ward 3, I've heard people speak very intentionally and strongly about what they would like to see true for students in Ward 7 and 8 and 5. I've heard that same passion in Ward 7 and 8 for students in other parts of the city. I mean, it has been consistent. And what also has been surprising is the degree to which sometimes people don't know that, because they say, well, you may not hear this other places. But I've heard it consistent. So this isn't about, do people want it to be this way? This isn't about, are people working hard to stop it from being this way? I have no doubt they are. I've been in the schools, people care, they're trying, parents care, all of that. So then you say, well, why does this data happen? Why does this continue? Well, let's look at this. First of all, we can see that being in a situation where your family's on frivolous lunch means you're more likely to be off target in terms of meeting or exceeding the standard in ELA and math. You're more likely not to be where you're supposed to be. Okay, so not being economically advantaged is an advantage for every race compared to their subgroup that is economically disadvantaged from at the elite. But there's something else to notice here. We dig in. We notice that African American students, economically disadvantaged or not, are scoring lower. We also notice, because I hear folks say, well, we really need to focus on economics. We do. We need to make sure that economics is not an indicator of success. But we see that middle class white students and middle class Asian students, non-economically disadvantaged, are outperforming non-academic, should be about free and reduced lunch. Asian students and white students are outperforming non-economically disadvantaged African American students. And one of the things we know about students, non-economically disadvantaged students of any race, is their parents are more likely to have education after high school. They are young people who grew up with a lot of words. They've been hearing from the moment they were born that they're expected to do well. School's important. You say, well, what leads to this? Well, I don't believe it's a matter of a lot of people trying to hurt kids. That's not what I say. The reason why I show this data is to say that if we are unwilling to think about how we do school differently, then we'll continue to produce this. If we're unwilling to think about the environment, the social emotional learning approaches that we use, how we embed that in how we do our work, if we're so dead set on getting right to the main thing without taking the time to create space to understand what's going on in people's lives, the young people's lives, that's teachers as well. We're not taking the time to try to help people understand the compelling why we need to learn something and creating relevance. We're not taking the time to do the trajectory, the layouts that you just talked about, pre-K-12, to help students understand how things build year over year and provide the supports. Then this stuff is hard baked in. When we say, well, this is the way it has to be because this is what was done for us, it's always been this way. When we're making those types of statements, well, then we'll keep getting this. Because the institutions that we're keeping a particular way, we're holding on to things, they were designed at a time when it was not expected or required for African American students to go on to college. And what we're saying is it's unacceptable. We expect, we know, we believe, we will do everything to ensure that African American, Latino, white, Asian, rich, poor, IEP or not, they get what they deserve to get in terms of education. And so that's why we must focus. That's why we can't do everything at one time. That's why we need to figure out when schools get autonomy and when they don't. That's why I have to be willing to come in and have a conversation and say, you know, I really want to do that, but I can't do it right now because our focus has to be here, and we can get to that. But we have to get this right. If our babies do not learn how to read, and I know people talk about third grade, we need to get K-1 right. We get that right, third grade will be right where we need it to be. We've got to figure those things out. We've got to dig in. We have to interrupt this. And I know that we can interrupt it. We have to teach our young people that it's natural to have questions. It's natural to need help. It's natural. So we then have to provide our schools answers, and this is what I was really excited about visiting some of the schools I visited today, when they said, you know, we really spend time thinking about how we create spaces when students struggle, how we give them help when they struggle, because it's natural to. Well, then we need to do the same thing for our teachers, we'll do the same thing for our principals, we'll do the same thing for our students. And so I want to mention that because that's not the system that was designed for most of us. And if we continue to perpetuate that, we'll continue to get this. It's not about how we feel about it. It is, we need to give people what they need. And I like to use this slide to illustrate this because there's been a lot of amazing work that's been happening in DC. There's been a lot of improvement that's happened in DC. And none of us feel good about this. I have slides that show that break this down by ward. Geography, zip code should not be a indicator of academic outcomes. None of us want that. Well, I want to make sure that the students in every ward gets what they need. Why? Because every engagement I've been in, that's what I've heard. So we have to build. It's not a rebuild. It's not a restart. It's an opportunity to hone, to focus, and to think about what's first, second, third, fourth, and how do we begin to think differently about what great looks like. And I think great feels good. And I wish I could flip a switch and make it happen right away. I can't. I'm going to need everyone's help. With that, this is it, and I think the rest is all is Q&A. Is that right?
Yeah. So we have room now to take the rest of the time to have some question and answer back and forth. But I ask that folks just sort of reflect on, if you can, what's happening now in your wards in terms of priorities, what's your focus this year, as well as reflect also on how the State Board of Ed and DCPS can continue to build a strong relationship and partnership. So strategies to do that. So open Q&A, but if you can reflect on that throughout the conversation, that'd be great.
Yes, I would like to just reflect on some things that are happening in Ward 4. Our elementary schools are doing better, and the fact that we have an enormous amount of K-8 schools that probably need to be looked at differently, and promoting the middle and high school is where is the challenge for us for BCPS. And just recently, I was with my parents who share a serious concern about the fact that their children are in IB elementary schools and do not see the feeder schools for middle and high school other than Bill and Wilson. And that concerns them because they feel that they may be rezoned, as they say. I haven't heard anything on it, but that was a concern that
We may be rezoned.
Yes. And so they're so fearful of it being rezoned so that their feeder school may be included with a middle school and a high school. The challenge is making sure that before the school gets renovated, that we know ahead of time.
So are we talking specifically about Shepherd?
Specifically about Shepherd and some of the surrounding ed campuses. As I visit them, parents come up to me and say there are no options, and we are moving towards looking at charter school community, and though they still want walkability. And so is that being looked at carefully since Warford does not have the options right now for other than a 1 year at Garland,
So thank you for your question. I will say a few things, and it's complex. Ward 4 is large, and so I'm thinking about just the different aspects of it. But we'll just start with just Shepherd. I have no plans to rezone Shepherd. None. I know that those are conversations out there. I would be, my focus is like schools. We're going to build and do some really great work around the reconstruction of schools, and there's going to be an amazing program there. There's going to be amazing middle school, there's going to be amazing high school. And we want to make it so amazing that families say, I want to send my child there. Okay? But I also believe in options. And now, when I think about options, I think about options within DCPS. And right now, we have families, they're pleased to go to Wilson. And to have that opportunity to go in Wilson, I think it helps diversify Wilson. And I have data that shows that all of our students, regardless of race and economic background, do better in diverse settings. So we support that. And so then we think about Coolidge. I'm thinking about how do we, as we do at Coolidge, how do we make it so cool that families from a larger footprint would be happy to send their child there. I visited Coolidge, one of the best visits I had this year. And I've had some great visits. I have to, in some way, think about how do we partner so that we have more people understand. There's some amazing people, and I mean teachers, done some amazing work at Coolidge as we redesign and do the work with the community there, with the leadership there, with the students, parents, all of that. How do we get people excited about that? Middle school, high school, so on and so forth. And I think Coolidge, that could be a school that can draw from the city, just like Banneker does, just like Wilson does, and so on and so forth. And that's my vision for that. I visited Truesdale, and Truesdale is an awesome school. And with some amazing leaders, Katie Campus doing some really great work. And so we have to make sure more people know that. Now their story is really powerful when you think about just a couple hundred students a few years back, and now 500 plus, almost 600 kids in a really short period of time. We have to think about how we support that. I believe that what's going to happen in McFarland Middle School, I mean, that's something that I think is going to be huge for us. West Educational Campus, when I visited that campus, spent time with that parent community, I left there really excited about the potential there. And so I think some of it is the market, and some of that is communication and support, and I think some of it is really strengthening the approaches. Now for IB, we have Eastern. And Eastern certainly is a school that students can choice into. As a matter of fact, I want to make sure that we say to those parents, that any of them want to continue the IB pathway, we will ensure they get a spot over there. Be happy to get it, and it's a really good school. Hopefully people saw the article that shows that the data is trending very positively, and not to say they don't have significant work that they are still planning on doing there, that we need them to do. There they do. But it also is a school that is doing some really great things, and I want people to get inside it, because what makes a school great are the students and the parents and the kids there. And that's what helps us. And when that doesn't happen, particularly those who have the ability and means to get actively involved in the school, it just helps us get great faster and then maintain a standard of excellence. And I always say, if you show me a school that is doing well academically, I'll show you a school that's well supported.
Two questions. First, going to the slide behind you about the economics. What are your views on how financial literacy courses in middle or high school could help change that long-term trend in terms of economically disadvantaged students? And secondly, what can we be doing with DCPS to solve the middle school issue? I'm facing a lot of schools in Ward 2 at the elementary school level that have great attrition at the between 4th and 5th grade, and that's really hitting our elementary schools really hard, because you still have to fully staff that 5th grade. We're losing up to 50% of our students at that level.
Yeah, so two things. One is we are very interested in strengthening our financial literacy work in the district over the next several years. Very interested in that. I think that plays a tremendous role in helping you prepare young people for success while they're in school, and then also after school, and also even the entrepreneurial aspect of what's going to be possible in the future as well. So thank you for asking that. We are interested in partnering with Junior Achievement, for instance, as they have facilities. We would love for DC to be a hub in terms of that, and so there are conversations that are happening. In terms of
you have an ally here.
Perfect. I visited the facility, one of the facilities in Prince George. I think was it Prince George County? I think I was just in. I did that last week, and it's awesome. We want ours. We want it better, and that was nice. We want better. In terms of the middle schools, part of what our work is, if we go back to the ensuring excellent schools. That's not just we will have an office. That's their job. It's focused just on that. Okay, and then that work is about working with communities. It's a bottom up, top down. top down, of course, that is, if schools are identified as low performing schools, we have to go in there and be assertive in terms of trying to improve the schools. But the bottom up is schools saying with communities, hey, we'd like to partner around the work with this middle school. And I think one of the things we have to do, and I'd be happy to begin, make sure we begin this conversation as early as next year, is to begin to think about how do we partner elementary schools with middle schools and their families, particularly targeting parents in grades pre-K through 3rd grade. Okay. And really trying to say, what is it that we need to have in this middle school that would get you to see this as your middle school? Of course, high school would need to be a part of that conversation as well. But I think it goes back to what I was hearing over here, and I think we got to do that. And then know that we want to try to think about how do we position families to send families so that we have groups of kids, cohorts of kids that go to the middle school together and willing to engage with us and help us understand, because I know that sometimes people think that we know exactly what a school needs, but it's only really when the improvement process starts to happen when we start to get certain information where we learn, well, we got it 80% right, but there's these other things that we didn't know. And that's how, that cohort migration helps us fine-tune our support. So we want to be having that conversation there. Ward 6 is very similar. I think that's a very similar conversation.
I can follow up on that. First, I have to mention Shaw Middle School. There needs to be some sort of conversation and conclusion to what's going to go on there. But within Ward 6, I know you've heard from the PTO at LA9. Full disclosure, my daughter attends LA9, so I'm close there. I believe I'm the only elected official ward-wide in the city who has their kids in their neighborhood middle school. And there's a lot of issues with the staffing, and it looks like there's broken promises made, and I think that undermines some of the credibility of us going there and building that community. And I think if we can be more clear and transparent in the budget process, what are the expectations, and how does that relate to how the school staff, but what you just talked about, the role of those cohorts of parents who are leading the pathway there. Where do you see the LSATs of those parents having a way to influence the process? I would say it's incredibly frustrating. As a member of the Eastern LSAT, when things don't quite line up right, where do we go? Those who are on the Elliott-Hein LSAT had very different recommendations for the school than what was reflected in the final budget. And we hear from the instructional superintendent, it's the school's decision. When we talk to those who are in those meetings, who talk to the school leadership, who talk to the teachers, that's different than what the decision was made. And we have a middle school instructional superintendent, Milo Napoli. She's fabulous at what she did at Jefferson, and I think has a lot of great qualities. But her strength was not community engagement. And her strength was really around the academic program that she had at Jefferson. She said to a parent in my presence last September, it's okay that we won't have Spanish for your daughter this year. She can take it next year. We need to put resources into math and reading. In an IB school, after we made promises to parents that we would have Spanish. So those types of broken promises get spread far and wide, and they undermine the credibility. We've got to find a way to prevent those things from happening.
So, yeah, a few thoughts that I have, Joe, and I know you mentioned that you know how talented of a leader Superintendent Natalie Gordon is, and I appreciate that qualifier. And and I know you didn't mean to do this, so I want to say this strongly and assertively. Not only was she a great leader, she's just a great principal. She's a great leader. She works extremely hard. Now we have to make sure that we as a system are positioning her to be as successful and as helpful as I know she wants to be. She's proven that to me in a very short period of time, and so she has my full confidence and certainly my support. I think that's different than your original question around how do we position ourselves to be as transparent as possible around the budget and the role that the LSAT plays, and then when there is some disagreement. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we as a district have to spend some time, one, highlighting examples of across the district where that goes well. Okay, so to help people see there are a lot of places where it goes very well, and it's very aligned and all of that. I think we have to engage a budgeting process that at the district level that begins early in the year. And we have to start early in the year before any money is being talked about to identify what our priorities are and all that. And we have to do it as a district, and we have to model that and then work with schools to make sure they're doing the same thing. I think that we have to put in some protocols within the process to really ask our schools, what did the LSAT say related to your budget? And I think that we have to model showing the budget, and so that means we have to get some systems in place in terms of even displaying and showing numbers in a way that makes sense, align the goals. And so we're going to work real hard at that over the course of the next year to try to put ourselves in that position. I hope that we'll be better at it next year. I know that we'll be much better at it 2 years from now because it's really important that we do that. Now, Elliott Hine is a school that is really important, and first of all, I do want to appreciate you for investing in with just your time and energy and support for the school, because it's exactly what we need. I think that when we have to really get it right there, because we have to get the numbers up, because the fact of the matter is the smaller the middle school, the harder it is to offer the comprehensive program, and I'm sure I'm sure that Superintendent Gordon and the community was faced with a series of bad decisions based on the dollars that were allocated at the school, and that leaves challenges.
So, absolutely, and I don't want to sidetrack the entire conversation, but it goes back to even before those dollars are allocated, what DCPS has stated for years the allocation would be does not match the actual allocation. So there's a disconnect. The parents have for a long time thought we're getting X, Y, and Z to support the academic programming. We're actually allocated ABC, which doesn't meet that. And that causes the shortages, which means we're not meeting the program requirements.
I think that's helpful to understand.
I'm happy to sit down. I've offered multiple times to kind of sit and walk through. Again, that's where the LSAT and the parent voice, I don't think, is being truly heard. And then ensuring that there's leadership within the instructional, wherever, that aligns that philosophy of supporting the IB and ensuring that those resources are distributed and the programmatic requirements are being met. That's not happening right now.
Yeah, I would say I have confidence that we can do better in that regard. And I have a lot of experience with IB. Implemented PYP, MYP, IB, diploma pathway programs and all that, top to bottom. I have heard some things that are program requirements that I think we can do better on, and then I've heard some things expressed as program requirements I know that are not. I think we have to...
And articulating
I think we have to get clear on
has
that.
not been done.
I think we can do better. And I think that's agreement. I think that that's part of what we want to position our superintendent to do. I know she wants to do it, but when you're faced with real realities, one of the things that I'm finding separating just relative time, and it was a lot of conversation we were talking about earlier, is when schools are trying to grow, get better, and all of that. It's how we define what the supports are. And we can only do so many at a time, but I think that we have to be clear around that, and then those supports be what we said they're going to be. That's the integrity piece, and I hear you saying that, and I do agree.
Well, and getting back, and I'll pass after this, but getting back to what Lynette was saying about supporting the small schools, our conversations with your predecessor were always within what it says. We're always, well, when students come, we'll have the programs. That's not going to attract students. You have to have the programs to attract students. And we've got to find a way within the small middle school settings to have the programs or a clear vision for the program that will attract parents. Because otherwise, I found a 2011 article earlier today that talked about the problems with middle schools. Problems are the same today. They're too small. They don't have the supporters, as you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that, in terms of how we think about support, we got to, and then that requires investment. So part of the reason, and we were talking about investment, and I said, hey, I need to understand more, because if, the way I hear it talked about now is sameness. And that, to me, that's where I was struggling. To say, well, we may need to target some additional resources in a very specific place. And then, while we're doing that, we may need to then look at, say, how do we phase in starting at 6th grade X, Y, Z, so that schools grow up. So that's the conversation we're hoping to be able to get into. And the more I go around, the more it becomes clear to me we have to figure it out. So I do appreciate what you're trying to say in terms of how do we position schools to attract students. Now, we also have to be clear that as we do that we actually have to get the kids, because we can't sustain that model. We can do it time-bound for a small number of schools, but we can't do that across the system, or otherwise it'll start to impact what we're able to do in other schools. But short time, I think we can. I want to come out.
So, I guess I have a couple questions that are more general, so to speak. So, as I understand it, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. You've supported lengthening the school day in the past.
Yep.
All right. And do you think that that's something you're going to actively pursue?
I'm going to make sure that we find ways to have students in school more and longer. That'll mean different things. I mean, sometimes it'll mean strengthening and lengthening the school year. Other times it'll mean lengthening the school day. It'll be situational. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach, but definitely I don't think that our students are engaged in academic pursuits and extracurricular, co-curricular pursuits nearly enough.
So just commenting on that, in regards to lengthening the school day, I'm sure you don't yet exactly know what you're going to do, but something that I've noticed is, as a student in DCPS, or one of the reasons that I would say that I'm against lengthening the school day is because I've noticed that there is a lot of wasted time because as a student in DCPS, and the amount of wasted time is much more present in the on-level classes than as in like the AP classes, and I think that just in terms of looking at burnout, and students who are typically in on-level classes will be much more productive, will be focusing on decreasing the amount of wasted time as opposed to lengthening the school day and then leading just to more wasted time.
Yeah, I would disagree on the wasted time. Okay, but I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both. I think that we need to make sure that we have effective use of time, and I think students need more time. We built a system that was aligned with an agrarian calendar. And I don't know, unless you tilled any crops today, that that's necessarily appropriate. I think that what we need to do is we need to put you in a position to rethink, what are you doing your senior year? What are you doing your junior year? And what types of opportunities do we make available for students? What do we have students do while they're in school with trained adults? I'll just tell you, I don't believe it makes sense to have students come in and be filling out worksheets when we have computer programs that will give them information right now, real time. Worksheets. I'd like to see them doing the types of things I saw in classes today. The students were discussing things and doing something with the information they learned. Teachers were working in small groups, supporting students. Students had read something, they were discussing provocative questions. I visited a class where students were engaged in a book club, rigorous books, by the way. And it was amazing to listen to the conversations they had. We have to put you in that position. Why? Because we need to train you for internships. We need to train you to solve difficult problems that you're going to solve when you leave here. And so that is extremely important. And so I'd love for you, like for instance, we need to figure out some of the problems around middle school. I'd like to put some students on that task. And give them credit for trying to figure that out. That we can put some math in there. We can put some social science and literacy in there. We need to get you doing difficult things and all of that. But it'll look different because we also need intercessions. We need students going on excursions. We need students traveling abroad. We need students taking college level courses. So extending the year, I would say, or extending the day, if we're going to make it exactly the same, then I would be just where you were. Saying, why do that? But that's not what we're looking at doing. We're saying we need to make sure that we enhance it. Now we need to expect a lot more of you, because it's not lost to me, Alex, that you are in a global competition. I want to make sure you're prepared.
All right, so just coming back to that, so just looking at what I talked about, 4 levels of personalization. I understand that in some situations it may be advantageous to like extend the school day or extend the school year. And for some students, it may not be the best idea, but basically I wanted to voice my concern now that often when someone new comes in, they often have like the opportunity at the very beginning to institute like joining a change, and I just wanted to voice my concern for if something like that were to happen. I absolutely won't come out against it.
Well, I don't believe in blanket solutions on anything, whether it's extended the school day or how you approach math instruction. I tend to be skeptical of all schools, all students, on anything. That's a mistake. That's why when you ask me questions, I said, oh, sometimes extend the school day, extend the school year. But I would even say, even our brightest, most sophisticated students need more time learning. I'm confident.
Laura?
Thank you so much, Chancellor Wilson. I apologize I can't be there for tonight. Thank you for your time.
Oh, absolutely.
I wanted to ask about 2 things. The first is a really important issue of Ward 1. You're like the awareness of people present there, that dual language programs are critically important to our ward, and there are a number of them, including now establishing your patterns to carry dual language all the way through high school. So I'm curious about your thoughts in terms of your priorities related to maintenance, tracking, outcomes associated with, and potentially expansion of dual language. Because I know there's a lot that has to be done, and I see that you want to make sure you're focusing as well. And the second is I'm just more curious than anything else on your tours and all of the business you've been doing over the past couple of months. What have you seen in terms of the gap between how our high schools are preparing students for college or career and our graduation rates? Meaning that 69% of our students, when they leave the system, are not prepared for either of those 2 tracks. We have lots of data to support that. And so what have you seen in terms of where the gap is and what we can be doing to make sure that that graduation diploma really means that students are prepared for the next step?
Yeah, thank you for both questions. I will just start by saying that the work around multilingual pathways or dual language pathways will be embedded in a couple different large priorities. One is, as we think about how we support people, recruit, develop, retain our people, part of that that work is related to people who we need to be educators in those pathways. So we want to make sure that we name that. Also, when we talk about ensuring excellent schools, it'll be embedded in that work as well. So I do believe that it's important for us to do 2 things. One is to have more multilingual pathways, whether it be dual language or multilingual schools, having really thoughtful approaches, at minimum 6 through 12, and where we can throughout pre-K through 12 pathways for really thoughtful language programs, whether they be full language immersion programs or just really good language instruction, so that we can promote bilingual biliteracy as much as possible. I think that is important for us to do. So it is very much something that I'm interested in doing, and I think that it has to be accessible across the different parts of the city. I think that every part of the city should have those opportunities. I just think that's vital. Which means that we are going to need to partner with agencies to ensure that we are creating really strong pathways into teaching for people who might have been not certified as teachers, but might need to go through some opportunities to work and learn how to become a teacher so that they can teach in those programs. I think we have to really get smart, and I think we are learning as much as we can from the schools that are implementing, but also other districts that are doing this work, other states that are doing this work, around curriculum, around how we think about thoughtful implementation. So all of that's on my radar and our team, and that's going to be a focus over the next 5 years in terms of initiatives. So if you think about the initiative level, there'll be initiatives that roll up that way, and I fully expect to see that. The second part of the question, what? The second part? So the graduate piece, I think, speaks to, you know, our work. It really speaks to this data slide that I was just showing here. It is pre-K 12. How do we begin to position more of our students to get off to a great start? That's one. So we have, and I guess what I want to say is we have to have a bottom-up, top-down approach. So that means we have to make sure we have more early learners who are positioned to be successful and keep them on track because the outcomes that we are seeing where students are graduating not completely ready for post-secondary, that is an issue nationally. It is an issue nationally. And so I want to let you know that it is something I'm noticing. And then we have to have a top-down, and part of that is partnering with our university systems. And I've had great conversation with the presidents. They all came. We met of all the local universities and colleges. It was excellent. They're ready to partner with us on these issues as well as some of the others that were discussed here. And we have to begin to think about how do we put students in a position to perform or assess out of the need for mediation before they leave. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to open up people's minds as to how that happens, because it's not all on the test. The test is one way, but another way is actually putting students in a position to perform out of the class before they graduate high school. And the other thing is preparing students to pursue an interest while they're in school and leaving high school with stacking certification. So stacking the diploma with the certification or associate's degree, and then also saving students economic costs. So I think there are a lot of solutions that we can pursue there. And then the biggest thing is making sure, and this was mentioned earlier, and I think it was Ruth who mentioned it, is, you know, we have to make sure that the classes are rigorous. We have to make sure that students are learning. We have to make sure that we are really promoting high academic achievement. One of the things that our team has heard me say is that college level classes, I think we can do a better job making sure they're college level classes. You know, when I go into a class and I see that it's AP and it's the beginning of the day and half the kids aren't there, then we're not really being honest with them, because you can't do that in college. You need to be there. We say that which means that if we truly have attendance challenges for our kids, then we should probably schedule that first college class at second period, and then really expect them to be there. And then if we have a college level course and it's your first AP course and your first IB course, it should come with an academic support course that you're required to be in until you demonstrate that you don't need it anymore, because you earned a 3, 4, or 5 on the AP exam, or a 4, 5, and 6 on the IP exam. So we know that there are strategies that we can use. We have to have summer bridge programs to help young people understand that, yes, you're coming into high school, and we know we're ready to support you, but you need some additional support. We're happy to provide it. 9 out of 10 kids say they want to go to college when they enter high school. 9 out of 10. We need to give them we need to help them understand what that means, and then make sure that the support structures are there to help them get there. And then when students are ahead, when they truly are ahead, it doesn't make sense to have them stay and sit through the same things that we're saying all students need to sit through, when they could be doing something else more productively, earning credit that's meaningful and thoughtful, and that could have them more engaged. We have to think about that. And so that is important. And so we have to figure that out, and we will.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So I just want to reiterate what some of the things that we talked about personally, and a lot of the issues that came up today. So we are recognizing that there is a middle school gap in the city, and especially in our ward, there's a really what we talked about. So in the strategic plan, are these the kind of issues that you're addressing, how to close these gaps, how to get parents back into the public schools, how to make those schools begin to, what kind of strategies are you looking at?
So those are the types of things that show up at the initiative level. You know, for instance, when we say, you know, at the priority level, we want to ensure excellent schools. Well, you know, to start off out of the bat, we know that we are going to have schools that are rated as lower performing schools. We're going to have a strategy around that because we don't want them to continue to be rated there. And then we're going to need to have strategy around middle schools. We know that because the strategy around middle schools are also going to help our high schools, because many families are making those decisions really in kindergarten, pre-K, in kindergarten, and then they tend to seal the deal by third grade. I mean, so the student may have made the exodus out at fourth, but the parent pretty much were thinking about that in third grade. So we want to do that. And you say the strategies, I think we've spoken about several of them. You know, I do think that we have to have conversations around with certain neighborhoods, and I know there are neighborhoods that want it. I mean, you know, we have heard Shaw. I know that's also true in Ward 7, Winston. I want to be in a position as a district. I want to be staffed to act upon those things in a thoughtful, meaningful way, because to actually engage in the conversation and co-construct, it's going to and us to have a really high bar. We need to have some fair system of doing that, and so we are really trying to scale up that. We've done a really good job of doing that, for instance, with Ron Brown. So we're thinking about what does that look like in terms of systematizing that, so that that is a forward-facing process that could be applied in other contexts. And then we're having conversations led out of the Deputy Mayor for Education's office, Jenny Nile. One is cross-sector task force, but also just within her, within the cluster, around how might we position this to be citywide conversations. I believe that, you know, just my position is that new schools, whether it's one sector or the other, there should be a common set of data that we're looking at to make these decisions, and then the process could be a collective citywide process, and put parents in a position on the front end to be a part of it, and then come forward and say we like this model or that model, and it could be a district school, and trust me, I'll be very competitive to make it so. A district school, we want as many of those as possible. At the same time, respect if a parent wants it to be a charter school, but I think that we can put these conversations out front and give communities an opportunity to understand and learn. And just as I think we get to places where the community says these are priorities and these are vision statements and mission statements and other things that would pretty close to it what I would have landed. I think the same is going to be true in terms of school models, and I will tell you I'm agnostic as to whether or not a school is an art school versus a STEM school or the language school. What I care about is that it is a desired school, that it's an effective school in terms of educating young people, that it is a school that parents are excited about, and that it's a school that has a great culture where young people are affirmed, that they feel supported and loved, and put in a position to succeed.
So I want to pick up on a couple of things that you said and others said, and we'll see how far we get. But one, you talked about the budget process and how it has to start early, which is so important. I mean, it's one of the LSATs used to be much more involved, and the principals used to be much more involved, and now we get the budget so late into the conversation. So that's great. I want to encourage you to sort of think about the budget and the issues around budgeting more broadly. One of the things that has hit a lot of us here is the way the staffing formula works is it seems to be pretty severely biased against large schools, which tends to hit the large high schools. And I'll just say, we know that wasn't, we're losing 12 staff, we lost 9 staff last year, we lost 10 staff this year, 9 staff the year before, 12 the prior year. We're down 30 staff with pretty stable enrollment. I think it's a difference of 10 or 15 or 20 depending on the projection. So there's something not right. And it's not just us. I know Eastern is losing staff. I know Blue is losing staff. I know Columbia Heights Education Campus is losing staff. The big schools are losing staff, and it's not the same with enrollment. There's something there. So I want to really encourage you to take a look at it in a big way. It feels very start early and you also look at that, that would be really terrific. The other thing I wanted to raise is, to go back to your K1 issue that you said if we can get things right in K1, things will work out in grade 3, and if they work out in grade 3, they're gonna work out a lot better all the way through, and I totally agree with that. My day job, to some extent, is the whole issue of how reading is really, good readers of complex, complicated texts, or people who have background knowledge in social studies and science. And one of the things that has concerned me, and I've driven everybody on this board crazy about the need to do things that really encourage teaching science and social studies and the arts early, often, and forever. And I think, to go back to Joe's comment, I don't think it's random that the anecdote had to do with losing science and social studies. I hear it all the time in our schools when people push hard to get science and social studies. They have to push hard. They have to push hard even with their ISs, because that's not what gets measured. And when I go into schools across the city, just randomly in schools, because people invite me for whatever reason, I can't tell you how rare it is that I happen to see young kids in science and social studies. Now, I think it's a real tragedy, and I think that there's a lot of not coming to grips with the fact that that's what's happening on the ground. I would love for somebody to really look at it seriously, study it, and find out. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I don't think so. And I really hope you will try to get back to some of the metrics. I mean, and the metrics aren't going to change for a while for the overall SF, but there's things that the district can do that you can do to try to really encourage people to do these things.
There are a couple things there. Thank you for your question. I know we're just about at time, so I'll try to be brief. I will say a big part of our work is just trying to make sure that we are studying what our options are in terms of improving transparency around funding. And again, this is really more from the perspective of how do we just allow ourselves to take advantage of the information we know now that we wouldn't have known a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So it's in no way looking at anything that's happened in the past and saying it's good or bad. I don't come in with those types of feelings. I have data that shows that the schools are funded in terms of a very thoughtful way, an equitable approach now. It's just that I see it because I had to ask for it, as opposed to it being forward-facing. Okay, I do know that there are some times where that our funding formula could be better in terms of thinking through certain nuanced types of situations. Particularly, let's say your school, you offer a higher number of advanced placement courses, for instance. Or, you are a school that has large numbers of newcomer students. So Czech being an example, but Coolidge is also, Roosevelt are also examples of schools that these are questions that we're asking. So I think that there are things that we can think about to be more transparent. I will say, and I said this during the budget hearing, and I will say, what I'm trying to get is, look, there's always going to be turnover. I'm going to expect there to be some turnover because we should be asking where are we at relative to our goals and targets, which means that there are going to be some programs and initiatives that we started that we shouldn't keep. And some of the people who are tied to those programs, they may be the right people, or they may not be, but we can't keep things because we did it last year. That's not what you're saying, but I want to make sure that
I just want to be clear, it's not.
Absolutely, I know that's not what you're saying, but I wanted to mention that because some of what I see in terms of changing is that. Others of it is not, but some of it is. And it all gets conflated, and that's why I think the transparency is so important, is to help people understand what one is, what isn't. The other thing is, we want people to see the closer tie between enrollment and funding, because our enrollment is going to be up. And we had about 20 schools where, and the mayor addressed this appropriately. We learned more, and you gotta understand. I mean, I will take the blame coming in and saying a week into the organization, there's no way I had a full picture of what schools needed or not needed in terms of a week, and that's when all this was coming in. But I can tell you that 3 weeks ago, it was clear to me that there was more of a need, and having a conversation with the mayor. Mayor did work, and she made a recommendation for additional 5%. Now that, we haven't communicated to schools, but there are schools that we absolutely will be giving additional support to as we learn certain things to be true in terms of the need. So I wanted to make sure that we say that. And I have always felt complete interest from the mayor and other members of the leadership to ensure that we get what we need and keep in mind, I still have a teacher contract that I really want to get done, and I know that the city really wants to get done, and I know our teachers really want to get done. So all of that is really important. And then the last piece, the second part on the K1 and social studies side. What I'll say is this: look, I was a former social studies teacher, and then I'm sitting here and I'm looking at Congress building, Capitol building. We need to teach social studies, okay, and we need to teach science, okay. And so the Common Core was trying to encourage that when it was emphasizing non-fiction text. And so we need to make sure that people aren't thinking about that just in terms of the English language arts teacher. That's what science is. And that's what social studies is non-fiction. And so I'm not as convinced around adding additional assessments as there needs. And I didn't hear you necessarily say that. I heard you say what measure gets done. I do think we have to figure out ways to measure. But I think that we have to do that in a very thoughtful way so that students aren't taking more assessments than they currently are taking that. And again, I don't hear you advocating for that, but I say that out loud just so that you understand that I do agree that we need to really make sure that our students are being exposed to, I would say, arts, certainly social sciences and science, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't add to the test burden.
I totally agree. I just want to make that clear. And so I think you need to do things, since what people do get measured on is reading and math scores, you need to put, I think, something in place that clarifies that that doing these other things is also important. You know, on principles, they should have master schedules that show how these other subjects get fitted into the schedule. I mean, that's a simple thing that I've seen other places. So there's ways to do it.
No, that's right. So that's absolutely right. You just hit on a way right there. Thinking about master scheduling, thinking about dollars and budgeting, all of that, they're kind of connected. I think, Mr. Bachelor, I think you'll be the last one.
I just had a couple comments and one question. One, I did want to reiterate what was mentioned earlier by Jack about making DCPS competitive in a growing market of schools in our city. As you know, my ward is the only ward in the city that now has more public charter schools than traditional public schools, and really figuring out a way to draw our families back into the system, I think is really important. And I think a couple ways to do that is, one, what Joe mentioned is that vertical coordination, right? I mean, a lot of my elementary schools, you know, are filled up, but my elementary school parents won't be caught dead in their DCPS middle school, and our DCPS middle school parents won't be caught dead in their, you know, in their DCPS high school if they can help it, right? And so figuring out how we create a pipeline so that, one, those options are attractive after elementary school, and I mean, even if it's not, you know, another school in my ward, I mean, for most of my kids after 5th grade promotion, we might as well hand them a certificate and a Smart Trip card, right? They're going somewhere else, right? And so figuring out a way to keep our families in our community and in our traditional public schools, I think, is important. And third, and I mentioned this to you earlier, when, you know, a few months ago when we talked about how important I think community schools and investment in that framework and that model is. And I think you mentioned earlier the great work that's being done at Stanton, and I think that's being done in part by the funding they get for community school programming or for the community school focus, but also because they're able to provide those supports, that family engagement, you know, those social emotional supports at a greater level than their neighboring schools are able to do. So my question do you have a vision or is there a vision being formulated to really implement a community school framework broadly, right? Not necessarily you know, a large injection of money, but really encouraging individual schools to invest in those things that we know improve outcomes. That's not being done broadly or in a very focused way, right? I think we're seeing a lot of school communities kind of do it where they see the need and they're taking the initiative, but I don't know if there's a broad top-down vision for a community school framework.
What I'll say is there will be, okay? What I want to make sure that I do is think about sequencing of that. So one of the things I'm really trying to focus on first is the SEL component. And so I want to, if I had, you know, magic, I would say, you know, let's get started. But one of the things I want to try to get done right first is the SEL components around the behaviors and all that, and orienting schools a particular way. Because in order for community schools to work, there has to be, and you know I talked about this, there has to be ownership of the success of young people, and then you have to see value in them and their families. And you have to really not see when they walk in the door all the things they don't have. That you really have to see all the things they do have and say, I want to partner with you on the things that you may need more support with, or may need more, because we believe you deserve those things. And so for me, it's really trying to get the SEL pieces. And then from the community school piece, we do have some schools that we are looking at, how do we support on the community school framework. And so I'll just you know, foreshadow, I believe that when you're looking at schools that are furthest away from opportunity, so they're being called out as a need to improve, I think that has to be a component of how you think about improving them. When schools persistently low perform, it's not just about the school. It's I think we as a community have to wrap our arms, supports around it. How do we make it easy for the family to use the school, leverage the school, as a means to get support on a number of different amazing programs that that the mayor and the city are promoting now. The job programs, the early childhood programs before kids get to school. I mean, we could be a great vehicle on that. I know that Councilmember Karen White is really interested in how we support more students having access to schools beyond the school day, access to the facilities. I support that as well. I've talked to Shanita about how we begin to lay out frameworks so communities know that that's what we're going to do. So I think all of that is important and to do, and I think that it's not going to be as a big of an injection across the system. I think it's going to be more situational learning and building grassroots up, and then us trying to think about how do we help schools understand the attributes, characteristics, and how to construct a really strong community school model.
We'd like to thank you for coming to us today. This is very helpful and informative. I thank you both sides. We hope we can do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate your time and engagement. I forgot to say this. I wanted to mention this. As we begin to do this work, we begin to think about improvement work, we're going to need, this won't be done in isolation, so we're going to need support with the elementary schools, Ward 2, Ward 6, Ward 8, Ward 7, and partnerships to help them think about how do we create spaces with the middle schools? How do we, because sometimes what happens is schools look at it as a review. I want to make sure that we are saying, look, we got to be honest, that families aren't choosing the school. We have to just rethink it, and we're not casting blame. It's not your fault. We're going to need your help as we do that work, because we can't do it by ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
So.